You're listening to a mini episode of the Practical Permaculture podcast with Joe and Elise.
Hey everyone, it's Joe here today with a mini episode, and we're going to talk about the fourth principle of permaculture, and that is apply self-regulation and accept feedback. So, in essence, what does this actually mean? So, this principle is about creating systems that are sustainable and adaptable by learning from our actions and really adjusting accordingly. So, through a permaculture lens, self regulation means designing a system that really can maintain its own balance and productivity without that constant external input. So, it's really fundamental to ensuring long term success in our permaculture practices as well. So accepting feedback, so it's self-regulation and accept feedback, and that means to be observant and open to changes that allow us to tweak our practices better and to suit the environment and our needs in a much better way. And it also really extends to self-regulation in the fact that of consumption and our energy and use, and promoting a lifestyle that really aligns with the permaculture ethics. But self-regulation, it isn't just about, say, managing our gardens and our ecosystems. It's also about managing ourselves. So this involves being mindful of our consumption patterns and our energy use, and ensuring that we live sustainably and we reduce our ecological negative footprint, without burning ourselves out in the process, because we're no good to anyone, right? Or the planet, if we fall in a complete heap because we can't, reach these big lofty goals that we might have. So, I love examples. So let's go through a few examples of what apply self-regulation and accept feedback might look like. So I think I've got 7 examples to go through. So the first one is implement a watering schedule. And I think this is really one of the simplest ways, and it does apply to the garden. There's a few in here that don't, but this one does. So it's really a simple way to apply self-regulation. It's really just adjusting your watering schedule based on the needs of your plants and your own time commitments. So as we know, overwatering can lead to root rot and other problems, and underwatering can cause plants to wilt and die, and they're just not going to do well. So by observing the moisture levels in the soil and the condition of the plants, then you'll find the right balance and you can adjust your watering practice accordingly. And that might be, through a myriad of different ways. So another example I've got is to work with nature to manage pests. So instead of relying on chemical pesticides, permaculture really encourages us to use natural predators and companion planting to manage those pests, or assists in managing those pests, because nature's pretty good. Like, she will do most of the heavy lifting for us. So, for example, planting marigolds alongside tomatoes can help to deter nematodes, and observing maybe which plants attract beneficial insects and adjusting our planting strategy based on those observations is a perfect example of accepting that feedback and then applying self-regulation. So I think that's actually a really cool example. Another super simple way to apply self-regulation is composting. And you all know that we love composting. Any permaculture, organic gardener, any gardener really loves composting. So a healthy compost system is a really great way to apply self-regulation. And that's through balancing greens, so the nitrogen-rich inputs, and the browns, the carbon-rich material. You can create a compost that decomposes really efficiently without it being either a sludge heap or a pile that's underperforming. And the feedback part is through the observation, and that's with your nose, obviously, for the smell. If it stinks, it's not on track, and if it's not really smelling very earthy, it's not on track either. Obviously, your eyes, you're looking at it to see how is it breaking down, and also your hands, so doing a squeeze test for moisture in the compost. And now there's lots of different, as you know, there's lots of different ways to compost. So it's all about choosing the right one that works for you and understanding what your self-regulation is with your inputs, and also what the feedback is from your compost. So the next is our choice of transportation and our travel habits. So applying self-regulation to transport, that can involve choosing more sustainable modes of transport, things like walking or cycling or skateboarding or carpooling or public transport, anything that is going to minimize your negative impact. But if you're like me and many of those options aren't practical most of the time anyway, then it's planning trips to minimize how often you need to drive. You're not going to drive to the shops to get milk and then you're going to come home and then go, oh, hang on, I now need to go and get, something else and go out again. So whenever I have to go out, I'm thinking about what can I do while I'm out? Not what just can I get, but can I do the groceries? Can I visit a friend that I said that I was going to pop into? Can I drop something off or pick something up? Or, how many activities can I get out of jumping in the car and heading out once? And also minimizing my travel time there. So, it's great to take the scenic route sometimes, but, often it's just let's get from point A to point B, which is going to be the fastest and the shortest distance as well with the less impact. Number 5 is waste management. And this one I think many people can overthink. And to keep it really simple, I like to use the 5 R's of waste management to help. So that is the first one, refuse. And that just means not to buy something in the first place or substitute it for something else that won't produce as much waste. Like might be buying loose mushrooms and putting them in a paper bag and not buying the prepackaged ones that come in a plastic container, which you might be able to reuse, but you can't, reuse the plastic wrap that it's in. The second one is to reduce. Now, that is to minimize purchasing the items that produce landfill waste. So, if we still need to buy them, if they're an absolute must, then we want to minimize to buying the things that we need and not necessarily, luxury items. We want to look at substituting those out. The third one is reuse. So can it have a second life doing the same thing? The fourth one is repurpose, and I love this one. It's upcycling. So take items and give them a new purpose in life. And this is the one for, the creative people because, this is where you can just about do anything. And then lastly, it's recycle. So choose items that you can recycle so it doesn't end up in landfill and it stays in that productivity stream. So that's really important. And accepting feedback in this context means regularly evaluating the amount of waste that you're generating and finding new ways to essentially reuse it. So, for instance, you might track your waste over a month and then implement changes like changing 1 or 2 products out to a recyclable packaging option. Again, very simple, very basic things that you can do. Number 6 is energy consumption. I think it's number 6. And that's implementing practical energy efficient practices such as efficient appliances, minimizing extra energy sucking appliances. If you've got, an old extra fridge or something that you really don't need and that's sucking a bit of power, maybe it's time to give that one a new life. So that could be repurposed as something. Also switching to renewables, again, that's pretty obvious. So whether you've got solar or you opt for renewable energy sources with your energy supplier, or simply being mindful of turning off lights and unplugging devices when they're not in use. And accepting feedback here means being aware of what your peak usage is, reviewing your energy bills, and adjusting your habits to reduce the consumption. So that's a really good feedback loop there. And then there's our own personal energy levels. And I quite like this one, and I think it's really important. So self-regulation for energy consumption starts with how we're actually monitoring how we're feeling. So think about your own personal bandwidth, because how much you give of yourself, can really impact on how you can perform for yourself and be a contributing member of society and being just being a happy person in general, right? I mean, if we're burnt out, then we're no good to anyone. So, and obviously the feedback part is, really tuning into how you're feeling. And lastly, food consumption. So self-regulation here involves being mindful of where your food comes from, choosing locally grown and ideally organic produce where it's possible. I know it's really hard sometimes, but where you possibly can, be aware and, that's the goal. That's what you're aiming for. And reducing food waste. So buying only what you need, and it might be then sharing surplus and composting anything that you don't need. So feedback for this might look like the moldy veggies sitting in the bottom of the fridge, totally guilty, or expired foods in your cupboard and things like that where you're going, okay, you know what, I've probably over purchased here for what our actual needs were. So it's constantly assessing and evaluating. But it also means, from that food consumption side of things, listen to your own body's needs and adjusting what and how you eat accordingly. And that can lead to healthier lifestyle. It can, really reduce negative impacts on on your own body and also on the environment as well. So, again, it's just using what you need and being aware of what you need. So really, by being purposeful in our plans and thoughts and actions, and identifying the indicators that tell us that we're on the right track, or that maybe we're not quite on the right track on where we want to be, we can really create some robust systems that are more resilient and they're sustainable, or even better, regenerative for us and for the planet as well. So that is apply self-regulation and accept feedback. So that's it for this week. Hope you enjoyed our mini episode, and we'll see you for the next episode.
Thanks for listening to the Practical Permaculture podcast. Jump onto our Facebook group to keep the chat going and to look for any resources that we mentioned on today's show. Look in the show notes.
And if you enjoyed today's episode, then please give us a like, a review, and share with your friends. And if you didn't, then that's okay. We're sure you'll find the right podcast for you.